JP, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No, this will be great. And I told you this offline, but just a little behind the scenes for our listeners. We usually do a lot of research prep work prior to our interviews just because we want to make sure we're getting good questions. Your story is so fascinating to me that I have done very little prep work for this interview because I am just so intrigued at how you've built this business for yourself. So what you say is you went from working out of your parents' attic, if I'm not mistaken, to over 20 million in sales in the car audio industry. And that to me is just such a huge leap. So I want to start from the beginning. What were you doing when you were in your parents' attic? And what was your journey to get to where you are now?
But wait, can we find out what you were doing before you were in your parents' attic? Because I would be interested to know that. So we might as well go chronologically.
Yeah. So I was working at an airport for about 10 years where I catered to like private aircraft. So anything to do with them, fueling them, cleaning the toilets, washing them, and also inside the building, I was doing anything, vacuuming the floors. I did whatever, but I loved it because I love aviation. So anyway, I did that for all that time. And then I started I've always been into car audio, but not on the sales side of it. So I was just kind of dabbling in it alongside me working at the airport. But it wasn't for business or anything. It was just because I enjoyed having a cool system in my vehicle. So anyway, that was kind of how what I was doing for 10 years up until I kind of made the switch to doing my own thing, which if you want me to go through that story of how that happened, I can do that.
Yes.
So I was working at the airport for 10 years, and I would say at year 8 to 9, I started dabbling more and more into the car audio scene. And I had started I had a very large system in a Chevrolet Tahoe, and I would go to these shows, and every time I would go to a show, people would ask me where do you get your equipment from? And I'm like, I was kind of sponsored by a few different companies at the time. So I'd say, oh, you go to this company or this company's website to purchase the stuff. And I'm like, okay. So the more I went to the shows, the more people asked that when they would hear my vehicle, because it was a very impressive system for them to hear. It would just blow their mind. So it'd make them get excited about car audio and want to get a system of their own. So anyway, it kept happening over and over. And then finally one day I went to this show and somebody asked me, and it was like the light bulb went off in my head. I'm like, I could be selling these people this stuff if I could just figure out how. Before that, I didn't know anything really about sales or owning a business. When I was working at the airport, I kind of had a little bit of business, some side businesses on the side where I would cut grass, because I lived in Mississippi. So I had a little lawn care service, but so I had about 10 yards that I cut after hours of not working at the airport. And I also waited tables at a restaurant, and I also detailed cars and airplanes on the side. So at one time I had 4 different jobs, and all I knew at that time was I wanted to make a lot of money because that is coined as successful these days. So I'm like, I need to figure out how to make a lot of money. But at that time, the only way that I knew to make money was basically trading hours of my life for dollars. And so I was trading all the hours I had. I was working 50 to 60 hours at the airport. And on top of that, I was cutting grass, detailing cars and airplanes, and waiting tables on top of 60 hours a week at the airport. So that would tell you that I didn't have any time to do anything else other than work. So whenever yeah. But anyway, after I did that for many years, I had started going to some car shows with this system. And that's kind of how the idea started when the people were asking me how or where they could get this equipment from. So after that came the big question of how do I become a dealer for this stuff? And how do I, at first I didn't even want to promote it. This is kind of how, obviously my mindset now is totally different, but I thought if you were a salesman of anything, you had this negative stigma about you. I thought people hated you. So I'm not telling anybody I'm selling anything because I don't want them to think I'm a salesman, some scammy salesman or something. So that was my mindset at the time. But anyway, I contacted the companies that I was running their equipment in my vehicle. Say, we'll just use Sundown Audio as a brand that I was running at the time, and I still sell their brand. But anyway, so I reached out to them like, hey, I'd like to become a dealer for your product. What does that look like? And like, well, you have to have a business license. You have to have it's a $5,000 buy-in. You need to have a location to store it. Like all these criteria that you had to meet to be a dealer for it. I'm like, okay, so I started working on that and got the criteria, and I placed my first order. But I wouldn't tell anybody I was selling this stuff like on my social media or anything. And this time where I was going to all these shows and everything, I was making videos and uploading them to YouTube, and well, really just YouTube at the time. I started growing a little bit of a Facebook following, but as that kind of progressed over time, it went into all the other social media platforms, Snapchat, Instagram, like all the different ones. So anyway, well, that's how it started. And when I was just going to the shows, videoing people's reactions in my vehicle, I was growing this organic following. People were following me just because they liked what they saw on the thing, and I wasn't selling anything. So they're like, "Oh, this guy's just like me. He's just having a good time. Like I'll subscribe to him." So my subscriber rate was going up pretty good. I think I may have had 30,000 subscribers when I decided to do like the little business thing, like to start trying to sell stuff. But again, I didn't want to tell anybody, even though I had a couple of thousand followers on Facebook and 40,000 followers on YouTube. I didn't want to tell anybody because the whole salesman thing, I didn't want people to think I was a salesman. So anyway, I would just be going through the comments on YouTube or on Facebook, and I would see where people were asking, where did you get your stuff, or do you know anybody that could get this? And I would message them, like I would inbox them like, hey, I sell that. Like I can like get you that if you need to. So all the dealings that I was doing with people at the time was just direct, like through Messenger, because I didn't want anybody to know in the public that I was selling anything. So if you're going to ask me the question that what would you have changed about what you did, you probably already know the answer now, because you definitely need to tell everybody, like, you offer this product, you have a core or whatever business, you need to be telling people that. And when I first started, I didn't want to tell anybody. I was embarrassed about it. So that's what I would have changed.
Well,
so what changed?
Yeah.
What made you start becoming a salesperson?
Yeah. So, I mean, I just started basically posting about it more publicly and making sales posts or whatever. Even though I was doing that, it was still very, very slow. Like even with me being more public or more open about it. And so when I placed the first order to get the products, this is how I started out in my parents' attic. Like when I got the products in, I just started putting them up in my parents' attic. So that's where I was storing all my inventory at. And now, well, you can't really see my warehouse behind me, but now I have a 30,000 square foot warehouse here in Vegas filled up with product. So that's how kind of it transitioned in a really quick sense of the, story in the last 8 years. But anyway, so when I would get an order, I would go up in my parent after work. I would, like at the airport, I would go up there and get whatever product was. I'd print a label for it, and then I would take it to FedEx or UPS. I can't remember who I was shipping with at the time, but anyway, I'd take it up there and ship the product. So that's kind of how the infancy of Down for Sound started.
Okay, so what's crazy to me is that you didn't have any experience, and I'm just so interested in your mindset, because if somebody would have told me you need inventory, you need a warehouse, you need to learn operations, like there was just a lot you needed to learn, I feel like a lot of aspiring solopreneurs would run the opposite direction, and you were like, challenge accepted, let's do this. So what was that mindset? How did you get into that mindset? And was it just that you were so passionate about this business that you were like, I'll figure it out? Like, I want to hear this.
There was
for Sycamore and Laws.
Yeah, there was definitely some doubt there in first getting started, because the easiest thing, and this is what I did for a little while, was and luckily these companies allowed me to do this to kind of get the wheels, I guess, get some traction or whatever on like what I was doing. But you probably heard of a lot of people drop shipping products. So they would allow me to, so I started out doing it this way where I wouldn't have to like store a bunch of product, because obviously I didn't have room for it. I was just in my parents' attic. So that was, and stuff, car audio, like subwoofers, amplifiers, these things take up a ton of space. Like it's just big boxes of product. It's not like people selling, I don't know, phone cases or something that's very small. It's like these things are huge, like 21 by 21 by 21 boxes, and there's anyway a bunch of space it takes up. So I placed an order with them, but I told them, like, I don't really know what I'm going to be selling a lot of. I don't know, and I don't have a lot of room to store stuff, but I mean, I would like to order some stuff. Can you work with me on drop shipping? And they were like, yeah, we can do that for you to help you out. So at first, when I would be getting these sales, I was just the middleman in drop shipping it. So I would get the order, and then I would take the order and I would send it to the company, and then they would ship it directly to the customer. So I did that for a little while and started getting kind of a grasp on what I needed to be selling, because you always have your hotter movers, and obviously you want to stock those things, but you don't want to stock stuff that you never get a sale for. It just doesn't make sense. You're wasting space. So anyway, I kept that going for a little while, and had started ordering more products that were also I started branching out into other brands. So I started adding a brand here and there to increase my offering. So that was, and then I would have to buy their product too and start stocking a little bit of that. So I quickly outgrew my parents' attic, obviously. And then I went and got, I think, a 10 by 15 storage unit or something like that when I was still living with my parents. So I got that and was putting some product in there. And I had met my girlfriend, and now my wife. I had met her, and I had planned on moving. She was from Vegas, and I had planned on moving to Vegas because, like, she had a daughter, and I didn't really have anything tying me to Mississippi. But I mean, my family lives there, but I didn't have a prior relationship or a kid or anything like that. So the thing that made the most sense would be for me to move to Vegas. So I had already started planning that. And in the meantime, you know, life's always throwing you curveballs. And so obviously I was still working full time at the airport. And that was my meat potatoes, bread and butter in my income. So I had, like, you know, you want that comfortable source of income while you're trying to figure out what you're doing on the side. I ended up getting let go from my job that I had there for 10 years. And so I'm like, oh, geez, what do I do now? Like, because I didn't have really any money. I think at the time I just had saved up like $5,000, and I had taken that money and invested it into other people's products and was trying to get that going. But all of my money was tied up in these products that I was bringing to my parents' house and in the storage unit. So I didn't have any really cash flow other than a little bit that I was making off of YouTube. It wasn't, if I had to guess, it was maybe $200 a week or something. So it wasn't anything crazy, but it was something that it definitely helped when you lose your source of main income. Like, you're like, oh, okay, well, this is definitely going to help. So anyway, I'd already planned on moving to Las Vegas, and then I get fired, and it just totally disrupts my plan that I had, because my plan was to work the rest of the year. After the first of the year, I'd use all my vacation to move all my stuff to Vegas, and then I would quit and start my life in Vegas. So my boss had gotten wind of that, and I guess he didn't like the plan, so he ended up letting me go for that. But anyway, which I was devastated at first, but obviously looking back at it now, it ended up being a blessing in disguise. It didn't become apparent to me that it was a blessing in disguise until probably a year or two later, because I took everything that I had to move out to Vegas. And when I moved to Vegas, since I had been working at an airport for 10 years, catering to these private airplanes, I'm like, oh, I'll go to these places are called FBOs, the places that private planes go into. They're known as fixed base operations, so FBOs. So I'm like, I'll just go to all the FBOs in the Vegas area and apply there, and I'll get a job doing what I was doing. They don't need to train me or anything. I've been doing this for 10 years. So I was pretty cocky in knowing I would get hired, because I'm like, who would be a better fit? I already know everything. So anyway, I went and applied everywhere, and I moved out to Vegas. After I moved out to Vegas, and I had moved my product out there, and it was in my girlfriend at the time. I'll just call her my wife. It was in my wife's carport, and that was all the inventory that I had. It wasn't as much as obviously I have now, but anyway, that's where all the stuff was stored, and it was really, really slow. Like I may have been getting a sale every 2 weeks, like for something, and this could be a $50 speaker, or like it wasn't enough to be sustainable. So I went into my mindset in that time was I started feeling really kind of like a bum, like a loser, because I was living with my girlfriend at the time, and I wasn't making any money. You know, guys are pressured into, well, not pressured, but it's known that guys are supposed to be the providers, the rock of the family. Like you're supposed to be this role. And I'm sitting there, she's leaving to go to work every morning. I'm sitting here in the house she's paying for. I'm not providing anything. So it started messing with me mentally and emotionally, because I just felt worthless. Like I wasn't providing anything. And I'm like, what is my purpose, like here on this earth? Like I'm not providing anything. So, and I kept thinking these people are going to call me eventually. Like somebody at one of these airports is going to call me because I'm the perfect fit. A week went by, weeks went by, months went by. Nobody ever called me. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? Like, am I not as good as I thought I was? Like, am I not as good as I thought I was going to be, or whatever? Because nobody's calling me, and I would call them back, and there would always be some excuse on why they didn't need me. And it just didn't make sense to me. And obviously the longer I'm sitting here at her house, not making any income, is not good on me mentally or physically or anything like that. So anyway, one day somebody ordered something from me, and I decided to make, I either took a picture or made a video of it, like signing their invoice, like, thank you, Johnathan, and I really appreciate your business. And I took a picture of, or I think it was a video. I took a video of me doing their order, basically, like personally thanking them for their business, and then packing their stuff up. And I posted it, and somebody commented on there, like, you sell car audio? I'm like, yeah, I sell car audio. They're like, oh, I had no idea. Oh, I need this. And I'm like, oh, cool, I have that. I can. So it started out like with that post. So I'm like, oh, let me try that again. So that person, I signed theirs, I made a video of it, and I posted it. And I just kept doing that over and over. And every time I did that, it was basically casting a stone into the ocean and making these little waves. And that is how, and I still do it to this day. Well, I just got finished signing them. Even now, us doing, we have over, I think we just went through 130,000 customers. If I'm in town, I still handwrite personal thank yous on people's invoices, and people keep them. Like there's people with 20 of them posted on their wall. They'll send me pictures of them, like, man, I've been buying for you for all these years, and this is the reason why I still go with you. I mean, you're a great guy, but you still care about your customers. You personally thank me every time I place an order with you. So anyway, that's kind of how the ball got started in gaining a decent amount of traction on getting people's attention.
But GP, you say, I mean, this story is just so fascinating to me, because right now, what people may not realize listening is you have over 700,000 followers on social media now. You are an influencer, my friend, whether or not you like that title or not. So how do you go from writing these personal thank you notes? I mean, you just said, did you say 130,000? Yeah. Customers. How do you go from writing thank you notes to being you're a car audio sensation at this point? Like everybody knows who you are. That's a big leap. Did you do promotions, or was it all organic?
And that's the biggest thing. Most of our stuff that we've done has been organic. We don't, okay, I was just checking real quick. Yeah, we have 134,218 customers and 201,000 orders we just passed through. So that's the stats currently on the business of like what we've grown. So those 201,000 orders, I've probably signed 75% of those. Like that's a lot of, but anyway, so when you find something that works, or you think it works, like I thought that worked, I'm like, oh, you just try it again. Let's see, do you get the same result or do you need to change something? So I just noticed I kept getting about the same result, which was getting people's attention. So, and the same thing with the followers, it started out really small, but I just stayed true to what I was doing and what I started the page as, or the whichever social media platform it was. I just kept doing the same thing, but every now and then I would like put some sort of sale thing in there to get people's attention on like, hey, I also sell stuff. But I'd gotten to where obviously Down for Sound's revenue was far surpassing anything else that I was doing social media wise or anything like that. So I started naturally putting all of my efforts into growing Down for Sound and getting more business, getting more sales and everything like that. And I'm like, oh, well, I know if I made posts about like signing these people's invoices or these products that it would get people's attention and they would buy something. So I started doing that too much, and it turned into like my channel turned into more of just product promotions and talking about sales and everything like that, which turned a lot of people off. So my subscriber rate started going down, my view rate started going down. So I had to, and I still haven't fully recovered from doing that, but it was, so that was a learning lesson for me. Like, okay, we need to, what people started following my page for was like car show content, like going to these car shows and seeing cool vehicles or whatever it was. So that's what people were there and subscribing to me primarily for. They weren't there to be sold. So when I started getting more or too heavy on the sales side, it started turning people off, and like people started unsubscribing, and even new subscribers, the rate started going down and everything like that. So that was a very valuable lesson that I learned, in that if you have something that you've grown organically, be careful with sprinkling in sales stuff, because you can easily turn people off. Most people want to be supportive of you, but they don't want you cramming sales stuff down their throat all the time. Because anytime you go on social media now, you're already bombarded with 1,000 ads a day anyway. So people will just click off of the stuff, and like their mind will change to like, get this dude away from me, because all he's trying to do is sell me stuff. So anyway, that was a very valuable lesson that I learned later on in my career. But when I was first getting started, I just kept doing the same thing. I wasn't promoting sales that much. So my growth of my audience continued to grow at a pretty rapid rate.
It's so funny. You started out being afraid of selling, and then you wound up going too far into it. And now you're coming back into the sweet spot, which is, some people say, 4-to-1. So, 4 pieces of valuable or interesting or non-salesy content, and then 1 ask. I don't know. I think people have different formulas, but
and it's different for everybody as well. But you just have to test it and see what works for you and your niche that you're in, because it could be different for everybody. But it's all about testing and seeing what works for you. So,
well, so for your structure, do you post like every Tuesday and Thursday, do you have a set schedule now, or is it like when an idea comes to you, you post it, and has that ebbed and flowed over time?
I don't have any set scheduling for, well, now I've hired a videographer that shoots my videos for me. Like I take him with me to shows and stuff like that, and he shoots all the stuff and edits it and uploads it. So we don't have certain times, but I think we're estimating 4 videos a week for our YouTube channel. So but that's just on YouTube, and we're also like on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and all this. So I post, it's no scheduled programming for these other ones, or I guess any of them, but we try to stay as active as possible, because I think like if you're out of sight, you're out of mind type of thing. But I more so manage my personal page and the Life of Price page on Instagram, where most of that stuff is just like my daily whatever. You might see me getting in an ice bath, you might see me playing with my dog, you might see me walking through the warehouse. Like it's just my life and me sharing it. I've always been really transparent about my journey. So, and that's motivated, inspired a ton of people, but it's also brought out some haters, like, because they think you're bragging about whatever. But I'm like, I posted the same thing when I made my first $50 sale. Like, so, and every time since then, like, it just grew over time. So don't say it's like all about the money or anything like that, because I've been saying this, I've been sharing my story when I didn't have anything or get any sales. I was trying to figure out how I would do this. So, but I would say the majority of people find it motivating and inspiring. Like, usually at the end of the month or whatever, I'll post like if we're up or down or whatever. Like last month we did I had a goal for $2 million and we did 2 million and like 30,000 or something like that. So I'm like super excited with my great team and all of my awesome supporters and customers. I was able to reach my goal of doing $2 million in sales last month. And like 99% of people, that's awesome, man. It's super inspirational. But you always have somebody that's like, oh, you're just bragging, man. You're just, this is bad to flex on people like that. I'm like, it's like, I'm just sharing my journey, man. If you don't like this, just block me. It's not the place for you. I'm just sharing my journey. So anyway.
You could give away $100 bills and you'd find haters.
I've said something similar.
There's no
like,
win.
I could
find
winning. A cure for cancer, and people would say I only did it for the money. Like,
it's so wild. But I will say, like, one of the things I really like about you, and I know this is our first time meeting, is you're just your authentic self. And I feel like that is another reason, another way that you've gotten to the success that you have is just, you're just you. So it's funny that we're talking about these haters, because I have known you now for 28 minutes. And I'm like, man, I feel like I've known him forever because you're just so genuine. So I think that's authentic, a big thing for solopreneurs too, is just to stay true to who you are.
Right.
And speaking of solopreneurs, so I'm curious, at one point you realized you couldn't do this alone. You had to bring backup in. Did you figure that out in advance of when you needed it? Or was it like you're working around the clock and now you're screwed and need a team?
Yeah, that was one of the most costly lessons for me in my career of being a business owner. Was like, so when I moved out here, I didn't have anything or anybody. Like, I didn't know anybody out here besides my wife, she was my girlfriend at the time. So I didn't know anybody. I was just moving out to this place that I'd never been before or anything like that. So, I mean, I've been here, but I've never lived here or known anybody. So that also was good in a way, because it really puts your back against the wall on figuring things out and trying to, like, you're like, I can't run back to my parents, or I can't call somebody I know to come help me with something. Like, you just have to figure it out. So it was a really slow start in getting that going, and it required all of my time. And one of my, I was easily working 100-hour work weeks when I was shipping everything out of my girlfriend's house, and then it grew to like, okay, it's getting busier and busier, but I still had plenty of family time at that time, because I had 5 or 10 orders a week. So that didn't consume a lot of time. But as it continued to grow and I got more product in, I'm like, okay, I need to start looking for a place to store all this stuff. So I went and got, I think it was like 2 10-by-20 storage units, like right down the road from her house. I'm like, okay, whenever I get some orders, I'll go down there and grab them and bring them back here, pack them, and then drop them off to ship them. Again, each step and stage along the way is like me figuring these things out because anytime prior to that, you just don't know. And then you're like, okay, let me try this way and see how that goes. So whereas now I would never do it that way, I know it was a necessary step in the way into what I've grown to today. But anyway, so I had 2 10-by-20 storage units, and I was doing it that way for a little while, but I found myself running back and forth. Even though it was just a mile away, it was time consuming to go back and forth. So I'm like, okay, I need to really find like a little place to actually have a warehouse or a business. And I was talking to some of the company owners that I was selling their product for. And I'm like, I'm thinking about, 1,000 square feet or something like that. That would be a lot more than the storage units. They give me a little office. They're like, man, I've seen how fast you're growing, and I would definitely buy more than you think you need. You're going to outgrow it fast. And I'm like, oh, these guys, like, they're just trying to hype me up or whatever. Prior to that, before I moved and before I got fired, there was a guy that I was selling his products for, and I was actually trying to get a sponsorship from him, and he told me he was a mentor of mine for a long time. And I still sell his products, and we're still friends, but we're more of, I don't know, we almost know everything each other knows, so it's not so much he can help me with anymore. We still bounce ideas back and forth, but anyway, I was trying to get a sponsorship from him, and I didn't really even know him at the time, and he told me to call him, and I called him, and I'm like, this guy, I thought he was the owner of this huge company. I didn't know back then that his company was just getting started, but it looked like this huge company online. So I called him, and he's like, he basically said, man, if you, I would be happy to give you some sort of 10 or 20% off sponsorship deal or whatever, but you really need to like do your own thing, like do some of your own products, or at least get into the sales thing, because you probably don't know this, but I've been watching you for the past 6 or 8 years, and you outwork anybody I know. And if you work half as hard for yourself that you do as you do for other people, you'll be ultra successful. And I'm like, again, this guy's just trying to hype me up. Like, he's trying to sell me, like, whatever. So I'm like, I have these red flag detectors up. Like, I'm like, no, get away from me. Like, why me, So anyway, but it planted that seed in my head of like, maybe he is onto something. Maybe I can turn this into something or do something. So I had talked to him as well when I was looking at getting a warehouse. He's like, oh yeah, you definitely need more than 1,000 square feet. You need like at least get 2 or 3 times that much. And I started looking at some different places, and I'm like, man, it's basically $1 a square foot here in Vegas. And I'm like, I'm paying probably $100 a month for these storage units. And then it's going to go to, I think it ended up being 25 or 2,700 square feet or something like that. So it was almost $3,000 a month. And I'm like, I can't afford this. I don't have any money. The money that I did have was tied up in inventory. So I hate using the saying being inventory rich, but cash poor, because I wasn't rich by any means, but all of the money that I did have was tied up in inventory. So cash wise, like I may have had $500 in my account, but I may have had $30,000 in product. But when you're trying to get into a rent a warehouse and you'd only have $500, they don't care. Like, they're like, you don't have the money for because they're going to make you pay for 3 months in advance or whatever. So I'm like, okay, well, the only thing that I can do is the product that I'm selling, like I won't reorder so much. So I would sell some stuff, and instead of reordering more stock, I would just like bring my cash up. So anyway, I did that for a little while, and I finally was able to get enough to get into the first warehouse. And that lasted for, I don't know, a year and a half, something like that. And in that time, I was working by myself. I was a solopreneur. I was just doing anything to do with the business I was in charge of. And the more the business grew, the more space it took up not only in the warehouse, but also space of me it took up. It was taking up a lot of my time, where I was working from 5 o'clock in the morning to 9 o'clock at night. And I was going like back home, and I'd go to sleep, and it was just like, but in my head, I'm like, I have to be successful. I want people to be like, I want my wife to be proud of me. I want my parents to be proud of me. So I have to make this thing successful. And I kept that going and ended up outgrowing that space and moved into my second warehouse, which was 7,500 square feet. So, which that in itself was a whole task in itself, because
now, are you still solo at this point?
Yes, so still solo at this point.
Gosh.
Yeah, it's so but I'm starting to, I'm obviously feeling like, okay, I need to get some help, but trusting people to do the stuff that you need them to do and everything like that, I had like a big problem with that. Like, my initial thought was like, oh, I can do everything myself. I won't make any mistakes. I can make a few $1 million or $1 million, and I can retire and I'll be done with this thing. Like that's what I thought was the dream goal or whatever, because I was programmed this from social media over the years, like, oh, you can retire when you're young and with $1 million or whatever. And I thought it was like, oh, this is a ton of money, because I'd never seen it before. So anyway, I'm just sacrificing everything to keep growing the company. And as I moved to the second warehouse, which it took forever to get into, it's a pretty cool story because it was another learning lesson for me. So I'll share it with you really quick. So I found this place and I call the realtor and I'm like, hey, I'd like to check this place out. He's like, okay. So I go and I'm go in there like, oh man, this is definitely the next step. It just felt right. It looked right. I'm like, yes, I would love for this to be it. But on the inside, I'm like, can I afford this? What does this look like? And I had a lot of doubt in me that I could actually afford this place because it was 7,500 square feet. So I'm like, okay, I'll let you know. And a couple of days go by and I call him like, hey, can I look at that place again? I probably did that 5 or 6 times, going back and looking at it, walking through it, touching it, feeling it, smelling it, trying to make sure this was the next step that I wanted to do. And I'm like, okay, 100%, this is what I want to do. And I'm like, how much is it? And he said, well, it's $8,000 a month. I'm like, oh man, this is crazy because you're going from $3,000 a month again to $8,000 a month. So it was a big step up in price for your rent. So I'm like, okay, well, this is definitely the next step I need to do. So let me know what I need to do. And he said, oh, you just get your accountant to send me over your financials and everything, and we'll look at them and then we'll get the ball rolling. I'm like, okay, cool. So in this time, again, this is when my dad always told me to save for a rainy day. You never know when the rainy day is going to come. And so when I noticed the hardship that I went through in getting into the first place, when I really wanted to get into it, but I couldn't because I didn't have any cash, it was all tied up in product. So I'm like, okay, as over the year or whatever, and I was selling stuff, I'm like, okay, I was putting a little bit away, just in a rainy day fund, basically. So anyway, we send over the financials to the guy. And before I sent him that, if I text him, he would text me back within 10 minutes. So if I called him, he would call me back within 10 minutes. He was just on it. And I'm like, oh, this guy's good. So anyway, I send it over. He's like, hey, I got it. I'll get with my team. And I think it was on a Friday or something. And he's like, Thursday. He's like, I'll get back with you tomorrow and we'll get the ball rolling. I'm like, okay, cool. Friday comes, no call, no text. I'm like, okay, well, maybe going over the weekend or whatever. Monday comes, no call, no text. That's weird. Tuesday, I'll give him another day. Tuesday, I text him hey, just making sure everything's good. No call, no text. Totally ghosted me. I called this guy and text him every day for a couple of weeks. I'm like, did he die? What happened to this dude? I was genuinely curious if something happened to him because, again, he was responding to me instantly for weeks, and then he just fell off the face of the earth. So anyway, I went back to since I couldn't get a response, I went back to the building, and I noticed that he was working for a company, it's a huge realty company here in Vegas called CBRE Realty. And I'm like, well, I'll Google the main number and I'll call the main place. So I call and the lady's like, can I help you? And I said, yeah. The even funnier thing is I remember this dude's name is yesterday. His name is Jake Higgins. But it's just stuck in my head because it was such an event for me for this to happen. So anyway, I'm like, hey, I've been dealing with Jake Higgins, but I sent him over the stuff he asked for and I just can't get a response from him. Is he okay? Does he still work there? And she's like, yeah, I saw him this morning. And I'm like, can you see what's going on? So anyway, she puts me on hold. She comes back. She's like, sorry to tell you this, and he definitely should have responded to you, but they came to the conclusion that you just can't afford this place. And I'm like, man, what a punch in the gut, I had all this great feeling about this being the next step. And I'm like, well, surely there's got to be something that you can do or some sort of something. Can you ask them if there's any way that you can get me into this place or whatever? So she said, give me a minute. She put me on hold. What seemed like an eternity. It may have been a minute, but it seemed like an hour went by. And I was sitting there waiting. She comes back and she's like, the only thing that they could come up with, and we've never done this before, but since you're not qualified for this space, is you'd have to pay a year's rent in advance. And I'm like, a year's rent in advance? And she said, yeah. So it'd be, I don't know, $96,000 or something like that. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, so I said, can you give me a minute? She said, yeah. And so she thought I was going to say, no, that's crazy or whatever. So I go and I log into my bank account. I have like $96,500 in there. And I'm like, so I get back on the phone. I'm like, are you still there? She said, yeah. I'm like, would you like that in cash or a check? Dead silence, like dead silence on the other end of the phone. And I'm like, hello. And she said, yeah, I'm here. I'm like, did you hear me, cash or a check? And she said, yeah, I just can't believe I heard that. I've been working here for 20 something years and I've never seen this type of deal come across. And I never thought the person would say, yes, I'll do that. So I went down to the bank and I'm like, well, tell me when I can come there and get the keys. And she was like, well, if you want to come by at lunch, I'm like, okay, I'll see you. So I went to the bank and I'm like, hey, I would like to get a cashier's check for $98,000 or $96,000 or whatever it was. And the bank is like, are you getting scammed? Like, because I'm pointing out everything that I have, like down to $500. And so they're like, are you sure you want to do this? Like, is somebody trying to scam you? Is some, like, they thought somebody was trying to take advantage of me or when I'm like, no, it's for my business. I need to get into this other place. They're like, okay, as long as you're 100% sure. I'm like, well, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty confident this is the direction I need to go. So anyway, I get the check and I go down there to their main facility, which is right by the Vegas Strip, and like go into the bottom and like push, like they tell me that their thing is on the top floor of this building or whatever. So I go in there. It's like a movie, and this is why I can remember it like it was yesterday, because I go through there and like I dress normal. I wear a down for sale t-shirt and some Walmart shorts. Like I'm just this regular dude. I'm not like over the top or anything. So I walk in there and I'm like, hey, I'm here to talk with, I can't remember what her name was, and she's like, yeah, that's me. And I'm like, well, I'm Johnathan and I'm here to give you the check. She's like, oh, come in here. And I go into this conference room and like open the door and there's like a conference table and there was probably 50 chairs in there. And she's like, oh, come down here. It's just me and her at the end. But the room is huge and it has like this panoramic view of the Las Vegas Strip. I'm like, why does this seem like a movie to me? It's like this crazy event. So anyway, I go over there. She's like, sign here and here. And I gave her the check and she's like, I still can't believe this is happening. Like, this is so crazy. I was like, yeah, me too, but I got work to do. So can we sign this stuff? But so I signed it, got the keys, and I was gone. So if I wouldn't if I wouldn't have always lived behind my means or learned from that first lesson, I wouldn't have had that money and I wouldn't have been able to make that next step. So it was a pivotal moment for me to get into that next building. And fast forward really quick into moving into the warehouse I'm in now. It's 30,000 square feet. So obviously I'd been practicing the same thing, keep putting money away. And I found this place and I'm like, I already know they're going to hit me with something. So I'm like, I'm ready. And a total game changer happened. So they got my financials. They went through my payment history with the other people and everything like that. And they're like, if you sign it was either 4 or 5 year lease, we'll give you 1 free month of rent per year. We'll give you 3 months on the front side to move in. And you only have to pay a month of rent in advance. And I'm like, what? What'd you just say? Did this really just happen? Because the prior 2 times I got basically hit over the head, on my rent situation. But this time they're like, basically please come. We would love to have you as a tenant. So it was a really cool experience into this warehouse to get all those things on the freebie side. Sorry, I went off on a tangent there. I know we were talking about solopreneur and everything and how we balance that. But what I learned from getting into the second place, after I got into that, I knew I had to work more than I ever had to be able to afford this place. So I was working again 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day. There was days. So we have split custody of our daughter Alyssa. So I would go home. She would be at our house for say 4 days, and sometimes I would not see her for the entire time that she was there, because when I woke up in the morning, she was asleep. When I came home in the afternoon or at night, she was asleep. And I'm like, I don't need to wake her up. She has to go to school or whatever. So anyway, I just kept doing this. And over the time of that happening, obviously I'm not being present in my relationship either with my girlfriend. And that's not good. Like I'm not present with my daughter. I'm not present with my girlfriend at the time. So it's a losing combination, but I had so much tunnel vision on like, I have to be successful. I want to be able to provide these people like my daughter with like a life I've never had, my girlfriend with a life she's never had. Like I want to like get all these things, but I didn't know until like a very long time later that like people have different love languages. I don't know if you've read that book, but there's 6 or 7 different love languages. Hers and my daughter's is quality time. But I thought because I was bringing her flowers every now and then, or bringing Alyssa a toy or something like that, that I was buying their love and getting a pass. And I wasn't. Like it wasn't good. So anyway, I come home. I think I had started getting. I had 1 or 2 helpers. They weren't full time, but I was trying to figure that out. But I wasn't in any hurry to do so because I'm still like, I need to run this thing. I need to do everything myself. Until I went home one night and I was eating the fast food. Like not only I was like eating junk, I wasn't working out. Like I was basically. I'm sure almost every entrepreneur goes through this stage of like you kind of losing yourself in your journey to like what you think is successful maybe, or what you need to be successful. So that was me. I was like gaining a lot of weight. Like I just had lost myself like with my girlfriend, my health, everything like that. So anyway, I come home, I have, I don't know, a Big Mac and drinking some fries or whatever. I'm sitting there at the island eating the food like right before I was going to go to bed. And Jess like comes downstairs and she's like, can we have a talk? And I'm like, sure. Like, about what? And she was like, what are we doing this for? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what are we doing this for? She's like me and you, like, I don't ever see you. Like we never go anywhere. We never do anything. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like it makes me like really emotional because I remember it being such a, like, your initial thing is you want to be defensive because you're like, I'm trying to provide for everybody. I want you to have this and this and this. And like, that's when I figured out like they don't care about the things, like they want the time. And so that's when like, I'm like, okay, like I don't need to be defensive. I need to be understanding of this. And like, if I'm going to become better from this, like I need to digest it and make a change. So that I told her that night that I would make a concerted effort into being a better like boyfriend to her and like stepdad in the future to Alyssa and everything like that. So I'm like, I can't promise that it will happen immediately, but like I'll definitely like do my best to start getting more help and everything. So I started getting more help, and I set a date. Like I started taking Alyssa to school on Wednesdays and Thursdays. Every morning on Wednesdays and Thursdays, my office now knows that that's mine and Alyssa's like breakfast date mornings. I'm taking her to school. So we've been doing that for the past 5 or 6 years. So I committed that time to her, and also like I'm like, okay, I'm not working till 9:00 at night anymore. Like I started bringing the times back on. Like I would first start getting off at 8, and then I started getting off at 7, and then I started getting off at 6. Now, like I look at the watch at like 4, and I'm like, I need to get out of here. Like, so anyway, I just constantly was bringing back the times on so I could have more time with them at home. So it took basically almost losing them because she was pretty much over it. She never saw me anyway. Alyssa never saw me, and so she was pretty much over it. So luckily she was willing to have the talk with me, and like I made the change then, and the rest is kind of history. But if I wouldn't have, or if I would have just been defensive, who knows where I would be. Like it could have cost me a lot because they're everything to me, and I didn't know at that point how much they were to me, but obviously now I do. And anyway, it was a very valuable lesson for me.
It's crazy how success changes over time. At first, it was all monetary, and then it's like, oh no, success is having the balance of a successful career and family time and workout time and everything. So it's amazing that you came to that conclusion. Oh my gosh, Joe, I don't know about you. We need to do a part 2 of this episode.
I know
because
we could, yeah.
I could listen to you talk forever.
I appreciate it. But yeah, if you want to do a part 2, that's fine. We can get back together. I know it can be, my story is, everybody keeps saying I need to write a book because it's so many, I don't know, juicy parts that can be expanded on, like just lessons that I've learned, but each one of those could probably be an hour. Like, so in trying to do a podcast, it's hard to fit it all in like a cliff note type of thing.
Oh, totally.
Because I feel like I'm not being of service like I could be, of like helping people, if I leave out so much of, because you're like, oh yeah, I went from my parents' attic to doing almost $20 million a year in sales. Like, if you just told somebody that, they're like, that's cool, but I need some meat and potatoes to go along with it, So anyway.
Well, Johnathan, we've got a bunch of really awesome ghostwriters, solopreneur ghostwriters in the solopreneur community. So if you decide you want to do that book, you got to definitely check it out.
Okay.
So very good.
And I'm serious. I want to do a part 2 at some point, because I feel like there are so many questions that I still have that I want to ask you. But
okay.
For the meat and potatoes side, this has just been such an inspirational episode. I just so appreciate your vulnerability and sharing your story, because I think, a lot of people could look at you and be like, oh, well, I can relate to this guy. This is kind of what I strive for. They can learn from your successes. They can learn from your failures of working around the clock. And I really appreciate you. And I just want you to know that, because you're just so genuine. And I think our listeners will really, really benefit from this conversation. So thank you.
Agreed.
That's awesome. Yeah, I
thank
appreciate
you.
the kind words. And yeah, it's just me, and sharing the story is exactly how it's happened. Like, I don't sugarcoat it or anything. And every time I tell the story about like almost losing like my wife and daughter, it makes me really emotional. And like, sometimes I cry about it, because it was such an emotional time for me. Like, when I went through that, because I knew that I almost lost them. And I'm like, that's what I was working so hard for, was like to provide something to them. And then like, you work all that time to only lose them, like in the process, like that would have been devastating. So anyway,
there have been some movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There have been some movies on this topic. So,
well, you now have a different definition about success. And we ask all of our guests this question: what is your favorite quote about success?
It's definitely delaying gratification. Like, I tell people to live 2 to 3 years behind their financial wins, because I've seen so many people, I guess the more successful you get, the more you see what people have went through, and you get in a different circle of people, where before you could be hanging out with people that are making $50,000 a year, nothing wrong with that. But when you start hanging out with people that are making millions and millions of dollars a year, and like, you see how they're operating and stuff like that, whether it's good or bad. So that's what I've found, like, is what hurts most people is they celebrate too quickly. So my coined saying that I kind of live by is like, live 2 to 3 years behind your financial wins, because you never know what can happen, and that can set you back like majorly. So that's what's helped me a ton in getting to where I am, is like living below my means for 2 to 3 years, and then level up. So people see like what I'm doing these days, and I'm like, I could have done this 2 or 3 years ago, but I've sacrificed the past 2 or 3 years, and now you're just now seeing this. So I always make sure we take care of our team, that everybody else is good, and like, then I kind of come last, but it's always worked out. So I'm cool with that.
And shout out to your dad for that initial advice for putting money away.
Absolutely.
And the work ethic that he gave me, I can't take that away. Like, he always instilled a unwavering work ethic into me. And where I'm not the smartest person by any means, and I don't want to be, I always want to be learning. He did give me they never gave me any money or anything for my business or anything like that. But what they did give me was that unwavering work ethic that is more valuable to me than any amount of money that I could have ever had. So.
Oh, well,
That's clear.
Such a good place to end the show. If people want to learn more about you, where can they find you?
Yeah, it's Johnathan Price on Facebook, just how it's spelled. And I also have The Life of Price on Facebook and Instagram. And then on TikTok, it's The Life of Price. Snapchat's JPD4S because somebody took The Life of Price for some reason. But anyway, yeah, several different ones. But if you go to, I think my Instagram, The Life of Price, it'll have a link tree there with like all the different things there, including the store or whatever. So that's it.
Perfect. Well, all of that will be in the show notes. We will definitely drive people your way, and we will be in touch with you for putting a part 2 on the calendar, because this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Awesome. It's my pleasure.
Thanks, JP.
Yeah. And listeners, thank you for tuning in. As always, we love providing this content for you. And if you want us to continue doing so, please give us that 5-star review, subscribe, all the things. You know what to do. We would love to see you back here next time. And until then, have a great week. And we will see you for the next episode of The Aspiring Solopreneur.